Welcome, everybody. Hello. Welcome to the session on why you need a strategy. I'm Heather Nelson. I'm a corporate partnership specialist. My firm, Bridge Raise, helps charities raise more money from companies. And today we're talking about strategy. If you have had those moments where like all the ideas are floating around and everybody's constantly throwing ideas out in meetings and it's a bit of like, pew, pew, I don't know what to do, then maybe what you need is a strategy. Certainly for me, when I wanted to talk about all things strategy, Veronica LaFemina is who I reached out to. So I am thrilled that she is joining us today to talk about it. So welcome, Veronica. And would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Hey, Heather. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm Veronica LaFemina, and my advisory firm, LaFemina and Co., works with nonprofit organizations and their leaders at the intersection of strategy, change management, and communication. So we really focus on how can we help you and your organization go from feeling stressed or overwhelmed to more strategic and how you think, plan, and work. We focus a lot on how do we help the people within organizations be well coordinated and on the same page. And that often starts with our strategy and identity. So I'm excited to be here today to talk about this topic. I could geek out on it for a long time, but we're going to keep it like shorter and sweeter. And also, hopefully, folks will be leaving with some actionable steps they can take in their departments or organizations.
Yeah, I love that. And it's, we will, we do this, have this long, so we will be short and sweet, but I will plug right from the beginning, everybody, that Veronica is very, very generous with her knowledge in LinkedIn. So if you want to learn about more things related to this area, please do make sure to follow her. I am constantly learning in what I call like bite-sized pieces, like micro learning moments on LinkedIn with Veronica. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. But let's get started. I honestly think the starting point for me is like the most obvious thing, that what is a strategy, or what, like, the word strategy means, like, to some people, I think it means work plan. Some people it's like ideas. Like, it's such a word that can mean so many different things. So tell us what it means for you and what you try to infuse in the organizations that you work with, or make recommendations to, about what having a strategy means.
Yeah, so this is so important because when we have different interpretations of a word, it messes us up from the get-go, right? With our teams, with our colleagues in other departments. And my experience comes from, having spent 10 years as a strategic communications and public affairs professional, where we were thinking about that question. How do we create an environment where our mission or our movement or message can succeed? And then I went 10 years in-house at national nonprofits here in the US, leading both communications teams, but then also strategy work, and thinking about how do we get all of these humans who want to do well together on the same page. Strategy, there are lots of different definitions. The one that I think is the most helpful for us as we are laying out organizational or department strategies is this, right? So strategy is a series of interconnected choices about what you will and won't do to reach your goals, right? So if you have more of a math brain or like the short and sweet, I sometimes write that as strategy equals vision plus decisions. And the aim there is not to have some like big, beautiful language that feels inspiring and that we all like feel good when we walk away, but then don't know what we're doing, right? The aim with strategy is for us to lay out some clear truths about our organization or our department, who we are and what we're aiming for, and the way that we think we're best equipped to get there. It enables us to make those decisions or provide that guidance one time so that we can consistently make aligned choices, rather than, hey, this is our 10th brainstorming meeting this year and all these great ideas came up. If we don't have a way to figure out how those connect to everything else we're doing, or if we're having to make a new decision every time, that means we're losing time, we're losing energy to advancing our mission because we're spending all that time trying to get on the same page. So strategy really helps with that.
Yeah. Well, and I like that idea too of on the same page, because I know that one of the things that you are brilliant at and talk a lot about is like sort of the shorter version of a strategy. Like this isn't a big, huge document. It is something that, can be concise enough, right? That it can be a touchstone or a check back kind of document. Tell me a little bit about why you sort of promote that idea so much, that sort of like, more short version of a strategy, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously, different kinds of organizations of different sizes will use different strategy tools. I
Mhm.
like one-page plans for departments and often for organizations because they encourage us to make clear choices about what we will and won't do.
Mhm.
If you're going to fill a 30-page strategic plan,
Right.
probably there's too much stuff in there that you actually can't get to, right?
Right.
And you are creating a laundry list or to-do list for yourself instead of providing clear direction on the choices and behaviors we're going to keep making. So when we
Mhm.
keep it short and sweet, it is much easier to say who we are, who we serve, what we're aiming for, and the main ways we're going to get there.
Mhm.
And so by keeping it to that one page, then if there are questions or opportunities where we might need some clarification, it's a lot easier and less overwhelming to explain one page really well and get great at that and be consistent and focused
Mhm.
rather than if we have new staff who are reading a 25-page plan and they're so overwhelmed and have so many questions that they just go into, I'm not going to think about it too much and just do what my boss tells me to do.
Right. Yeah, I know it's true. And I think we're seeing a bit of a theme with like we all understand what strategy means and have a common understanding of the word. And then if with a shorter document, we can actually get to the point where we all have a common understanding of what's on the page. And then if you need like more case for support or operational detail on some of the things, like that can be a separate thing. Right. And I
Yeah,
think maybe like
operational
the kitchen
plans.
sink approach of like, let's put everything into the strategy document, even
Right.
just
And
at that point.
and like I can't see the future. I mean, if I could, that would make
Mhm.
me a very successful, like
Right.
business strategist who is just telling everybody this is the perfect way to succeed. But strategy is only right in retrospect, right? It is a hypothesis about what we think is going to be the best way based on who we are and the resources we have available to call on
Mhm.
to reach our goals. And so when we work on like thinking about perfect plans and getting caught up in that, we sometimes forget that what we need out of a strategy is to all get on the same page
Mhm.
about what we're focusing on and the choices or behaviors we'll undertake to do that over and over again. And so when we can look at it as like a guidelines for our behavior or guidelines to help us, evaluate opportunities or make decisions rather than, a list of here are all of the boxes we're going to tick over the next, 3 years. It opens up more flexibility and opportunity, but it also then ensures that our colleagues in other departments are on board and say, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
we can align our behaviors and choices with that too.
Yeah, it's true. I love what you're saying about the sort of strategy in retrospect, and as well as like the perfect path forward. I have this happen a lot when people ask me, even at a micro level, how to build a strategy for a specific corporate partnership. And I will map out a strategy and, with confidence say, let's do this. And it's with confidence based on experience, as I'm sure it is when you're doing this with an organization. But in no way am I saying that this is the only option for a strategy, nor that I can guarantee success from the strategy. Like this is, I think, a really important thing that you've brought up here is that a strategy is, some decision, a series of decisions. It's a path forward, but there's nobody that knows that there couldn't have been another one that would have worked just as well, or could have been equally successful, or maybe even more successful. We don't know that. It's just, what is the path that we are choosing.
Yeah, and I think like we're basing that path on experience, right?
Yeah.
On the data we have available, on the team we
Mhm.
have in place or the amazing advisors we're able to bring on, right?
Mhm.
On what we're best equipped to do. I see a lot of organizations and departments create strategies for an organization that is not them, right? That's not who they are out in the world. So they're trying to get an A plus on a strategy assignment instead of choosing something that makes sense as a pathway for them as an organization or a
Right.
team.
Right.
Because they have maybe heard about something new that they think we should be implementing, but haven't done the evaluation of like, are we actually equipped to do that yet? Are there
Mhm.
steps we could
Mhm.
do before we're ready to make that a major part of what we do? I also, see folks unwilling to say what we're not going to do. And honestly, like saying no is one of the most powerful parts of strategy. And it's hard, right? In the nonprofit world, we want to find a way. We want to say yes. We want to, make sure that works. But corporate development is a great example, Heather, where, when we say, we want to work with values aligned companies, but then we start compromising on that, it creates so many headaches and a lot of wasted resources down the road. Or when we, aren't willing to make some choices about like, we'd really like to focus on companies at this revenue level or located in these geographical areas or working in these kinds of industries that we think really align, with our organization, then we are trying to find supporters everywhere. And often it feels disjointed.
Mhm.
It's hard for our partners. They don't know what we're trying to accomplish because what we're trying to accomplish is we'll take money by any route, right? And that's not the healthiest way and most sustainable way, right, to build partnerships. So like that, I don't know, having a strategy helps us gut check with ourselves, right? If we are stuck in full-time opportunistic mode or where we'll take anything that comes our way, or if we're really trying to build like lasting partnerships that will fuel our mission and our organization going forward.
Yeah, yes, really, really great points there, Veronica. I mean, I think one of the things that we find a lot is like opportunistic often is the like kind of default position when you don't have a strategy. Then it's just like whoever comes or whoever I think of or whoever somebody mentions to me. And, there's a lot of data that shows that, the most long-term renewing partnerships are based on aligned values, are based on, sticky, deep relationships. So if your approach is constantly opportunistic, over time, we know that that's not going to make the most money for you. And also is not going to be the most sustainable or scalable either. I think one of the things I love about your strategic approach is having that kind of, infrastructure and focus in a department is one of the things that allows you to bring others into the department, along the way. When you're one person, keeping track of the opportunistic approaches is not easy, but it's easier. But if you're talking about a bigger organization with a team, if we're all working opportunistically and not strategically, then it's a bit of a crap show, right?
Yeah.
Everything's all over the place. Where this is like, okay, we're going to focus on these areas. We're going to focus on these things. Why do you, no, not why. What is a tool that you use with clients to help them figure out what their no's are?
So that's a great question. And it is a little bit different for each organization. So like what I would say first is, let's say you are a development director, right? Or you're leading the corporate development team, as I know many of your listeners and followers are. By articulating your own strategy, right? And saying something like, one of our main approaches this year for the next couple of years is going to be a focus on cause marketing. We're also going to continue to keep our events strong. And we want to like improve our relationships on the individual giving side, and perhaps like with a certain area. So you have some key, like, this is how we're going to meet the financial targets, that have been put forth. Being able to then go talk to your colleagues in marketing and communications, right, of which I used to lead those teams, and say, here's what we're thinking is essential. Because if you start selling cause marketing and there is no ability to support that, or if you start saying like, we're going to, look for industries in these areas, and the marketing team knows like, hey, our board marketing committee has said like, we can't work with these industries, right? So that gets supported by things like gift acceptance policies or other like structures you have in place. When you're trying to get to know, sometimes it's helpful to go with the obvious stuff first, right? Like we're like of course you're not going to, right? Like with organizations that are active or like companies that are actively working against your cause, right? And might just be using you as a face saver, right? It could also be companies that like we've never in a million years that we're going to work with them. Fine, let's get those out of our brains first, but then take it one step further, right? And say, for example, if our mission team is not in a position to partner on like specific new program development that a corporate funder wants to, and we know that's going to be a problem, like we have to say like, no, those are not the opportunities that we're going to focus on, right? If there's a perfect partner and it really seems aligned and we can have that conversation with our mission team, we can still talk about it and we can acknowledge that it's different from the strategy we set forward. But it like at least enables us to then start talking to that partner about how else we can begin our journey of working together and directing them towards the things we're focusing on, so that as we develop a trusted relationship with them because we're working with them on things we can deliver really well, then perhaps that puts us in a position to have the kind of funding that enables investment in one of these new program areas down the line.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think that one of the things that happens is sometimes there is like the steps that need to happen to get to the place where you're ready. And so, sometimes if you say like, this is our priority area of focus, then one of the steps is like, what do we need to do to be the organization that can do that? Right.
Yeah.
So if it is, we really want funding to support programming, well, maybe there are certain things that need to be put in place for that to be possible. Or cause marketing, this happens all the time. People say, oh, I want to be a cause marketing partner. And my immediate question is, okay, well, do you have demographic data? Do you have loyalty? Do you have brand, visibility data? Like these are things that if you want to be a really cause marketing oriented fundraising shop, there are things. And so if that's a priority for you for a really good strategic reason, then we need to put the infrastructure in place to do that. And sometimes that's what can really happen with that clarity from the strategy. Then we can figure out the things that have to happen to get there.
And I love what you're saying there, Heather, because one of the things I advocate for quite a lot, so whether it's an organizational strategy or departmental, is this can't just be a list of all the fun, fancy things we're excited about doing, right? It really should include like the main things we're focusing on. And at least one of those, a short list of things we're focusing on, first of all. But at least one of those should be a culture or operational priority as well, right? Because you're exactly right. What happens sometimes is we forget that we have to invest the time and energy and resources in building those capabilities. Like if we want to become that bigger organization or that more sophisticated shop, right, that is consistently delivering in a certain way, we are going to need to invest the time and energy and resources and making sure we have all the right tools and making sure our team knows how to do this work, right? That we're getting the right kind of expert support to help us get it off the ground and grow. And too often that stuff kind of goes into like a side, area where we're like, oops, we didn't do that again this year. And then 5 years down the line, we're frustrated and don't understand why we haven't evolved. And it's because we didn't prioritize our like learning, skill, development, strategy growth. We were just trying to hit this year's numbers.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm just going to pause for a second and say, if anybody does have any questions, we can do our best to answer in the last few minutes of the session. So please feel free to jump in. And again, welcome. Feel free to ask any questions. And I love that a couple of you have like double clicked on a couple of things that Veronica said. Totally, you're so right. Strategy is always right in retrospect is a really good one. Okay, so as an organization now, we've committed to do a strategy. Like, why should we feel like this is going to really support our success? Like, are there some key reasons why having a strategy in place, just puts us in a good position to be successful?
So this takes us a little bit back to the beginning, Heather, right? Which is The word strategy itself, people have very different definitions or understandings of. And the aim of a strategy, like whenever I talk to leaders who have been in our industry for a while, right? There's a traditional way that strategic planning is done most of the time. It hasn't changed a lot in the past 30 to 40 years, though we are seeing like new frameworks come up, shorter versions, a greater understanding that we can't predict the future. And so how can we not invest a lot of time and energy in predicting a fake future and instead developing something that can guide us? So the number one audience for your strategy is your staff, is your team.
Right.
So oftentimes we think about, oh, this is going to go to funders, this is going to go to donors. Like we think that our strategic plan needs to be a marketing piece first before, or a case for support first, before it's actually a viable approach to how we run our organization. And if the people who are supposed to execute this strategy or supposed to make sure it is lived out don't understand why we're doing this, what we're doing, have the ability to make choices in their day-to-day role that are consistent with it, it's not going to happen, right? We've all seen organizations where staff will say, oh yeah, I get that. And then just kind of sit back and go, I'm just going to do what I was doing before because this is unclear to me, or there are 50 priorities. And so that isn't changing my ability to focus my energy or efforts in a certain place. So the first is, being really clear and aligned throughout the organization on here's the most important stuff. And like, the thing that's hard is the most important stuff does mean most important. It means other stuff may get bumped. It means we have to force a choice between a couple of things because of timing, what's going on. We've provided some guidance to say, this is the stuff that is going to rise to the top, or this is where we need to focus additional energy and effort. So that clarity and choosing is important because not everything can be a priority. We can't get everything done. The other thing is, good strategy, right, is flexible. So when we learn something, when we spent enough time working to do it, or when a big change happens, or maybe all of a sudden we're very lucky and get a massive grant toward our operations, we can adjust when that happens, but adjustment requires negotiation. Right. So a lot of times what you'll see happen is an organization will put together a strategy and then the departments will go off on their own and each create their own strategy, and then teams will create strategies and no one is talking to each other. Right. And so whatever mission is developing is not necessarily aligned with what is getting developed in fundraising arenas. Right. Whatever marketing and communications is developing may not be aligning with either of those. Whatever HR and finance are developing, which, are critical, or operations, all of those functions are essential for whatever we're trying to do. And so if we're out here doing it separately without them coming together, recognizing where there might be some tension, or just like, we can't do all of this, like, how do we get on the same page? So having the strategy and working through those conversations, right, being good leaders and stewards in that way means that we're not like shoving it all down to our staff who are on the front lines to then have them work it out and make a choice. Like, that's unfair of leaders to expect of the team on the ground to make the choices that leadership was unwilling to make.
Right. Because it's so good. I just want to follow up on one point you made, which I think it happens a lot in my work as well. The forward-facing or the public-facing document comes first, right? Oh, we've written the case for support for the public. And I'm like, yeah, but what about like the benefit framework or the guidelines of who we're going to work with that fit behind that? Or as you mentioned, like the strategy that sets up that marketing version of the strategy for success. So like, we have to start with that internal work. And then absolutely, like, is it helpful in many cases to have a public facing version of your strategy to communicate to people with? Yes. Like, you're not saying that's a bad idea, right? You're just saying, start with that. Like, it has to be first.
Yes. Like, trying to make sure that this document is multi-purpose or multi-audience is often like not the most helpful approach. And we
Right.
know that, right? I mean, and let's look
Yeah.
at the development world, right? A corporate audience, like in corporate partner, the language there, the approach there is different from a foundation partner, from an individual giver, right? From someone who's attending our events. Like we know differentiated messaging is essential in those environments. So we have to apply it here as well.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
that internal, and I will say internal and external can help develop each other. Right. So
Right.
it's not that you have to have one in place instead of the other, but it is about like, let's get the internal, right? Let's be true about like, can we do this? Is this something that we feel makes sense? And then as we're developing like cases for support or external materials, sometimes we'll discover something there that says, oh, yeah, that really does help clarify something. So they can work together, but trying to make one document all things to everybody is as if we were going to like send our, corporate partners and major donors the same emails we were going to send to event attendees. Like it just doesn't
It
work.
doesn't work.
Honoring the human, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work. And especially if your first audience of strategy, which you said before, is your internal staff, it has to speak to them first. We have a question, so I am going to ask this question. Okay, thanks, Natasha. Since strategy has unknown outcomes, how do you know when to stay the course and when to take these subtle cues to switch direction?
It's a great question. Okay, so first, what I'll say is strategy having unknown outcomes is more just like we aren't fortune tellers, right? We're still basing strategy on good data, on experience, on what we know that we can do and deliver well. And so when we say it's a hypothesis, it's an educated hypothesis. We're pretty sure this is the right approach for us. And we're choosing that not just but because we have a specific goal in mind, right? So making sure that that goal is in place and you have a way to measure it matters. So like, let's say in a corporate development department, you're saying, we want to, like, one goal might be we want to increase, the value of our corporate partnership portfolio by X percent over the next 2 years, right? And another one might be related to, like, we want to have more introductory conversations, right? Like we want to increase the number of partners we have. We might be at different levels, things on those lines. We can still measure that, right? And so if what we are seeing in those measurements is that we're not quite getting there or this isn't working, that's a great time to come back around and have a conversation around what's working, what's not working, and what we're not sure about, right? That's when we miss a lot of the time. What aren't we sure about? We can't tell if this is working or not. So what I recommend there, Natasha, is to set a cadence at which you'll do that. So to have like an organized quarterly conversation or every 6 months conversation. Honestly, monthly is too much because we're like too far, in the weeds. We have to be able to pull up a little bit and understand like trends over time, especially in places like corporate where, our buyer cycle is a lot longer. Perhaps than others, or if we're working with major gifts or legacy giving, right? Like the cultivation time, the approach takes longer. And so if we're looking for results in like a month or two, that's just not going to happen. So the other thing there too can be thinking about what are those indicators that have worked in the past to tell you that something is going well in this area, and can we use those as leading indicators? So yeah, like sticking with it is important, but then having regular evaluation conversations, time to discuss, the chance to say, hey, I'm noticing this and I want to flag it. So when we come back in another quarter, like, let's talk about if we think this approach is still valid, and then working to actually get the information that can help us understand that better.
I love that advice. So make sure that the hot time horizon is long enough. Like I do sometimes see people abandon strategies too quickly, right? Like to your point about corporate life cycle for a new donor, 9 to 12 months, you can't really evaluate new activities in 6, right? Like you just don't have enough data. So I really like that, but also make sure you are checking back with your strategy. You're not just saying, okay, we did all the hard work. We're going to stick with it for 3 years without checking in. So like figuring that out for your organization. And I also like, which you kind of mentioned, and I work with this with some clients as well. Like, what are some leading indicators? So, we have our bigger metrics, but sometimes it like looking at like, what are some things that we, if we're not doing the initial outreach or we're not having initial calls at all, then we're, that's a really early warning sign that you're not going to be converting corporations in 9 or 12 months if you can't even get a call with them and you've reached out to 10 and nobody's getting you on the phone, right? So I think there are, in some cases, like these early signals of, okay, we may not quite have something right. So for your particular area, if you can look for what those are, so that when you come back to the strategy, you do have the right data, like to have a good conversation about it, right?
And I think this is a great time to bring in an advisor, Heather, right? Like, so if an organization is like, we want to get more into corporate, but we don't know what that looks like, then you hire Bridge Race, right? So someone to help you figure that out. What I would say is, if this is an area that's new for your organization, or where you just don't actually know what works, that's a good indicator that you might need to take a couple steps back and say, like, are we ready to do this? Is this something we are staffed and operationalized to do? And if the answer is yes, but we've just got a bunch of new team members, like hiring an advisor can be a great part of that and helping you build that out. The other thing I would just quickly note is that it's okay to experiment with new things. And on the strategy work I do with organizations, I encourage them to identify the specific experiment that they're going to run so that they know how much, funding they're willing to put behind it, time they're willing to put behind it, and that we're not jumping across 5 different ideas. We're saying these are the 2 things we really want to test over the next year to see if those are things we want to add into our portfolio or work better. So this isn't saying you can't ever do anything else, but it is saying, like, let's make the decision one time and stay focused on that so that we're not constantly questioning ourselves, constantly jumping to whatever we're seeing on LinkedIn or in the news be like the next hot thing. So much of the work that goes into, running successful nonprofits is about like making sustainable strategic choices that are going to help us continue to deliver on our mission, be great places to work, and be the type of organizations that partners want to work with.
Yeah, I love it. Well, we are out of time, and I just want to just reiterate, like the fact that we're not saying that strategy is designed to like not have any fun. So glad you added that at the end. Like, you can still have like the fun project that you're testing. I mean, as a business owner, the same thing happens to us. I think often, like, there's all these new ideas, as you can try them, but how many can you afford to try? How much resources can you put in?
Right. Like that's
right? Okay, so before I close, I thought one thing: if they don't have time to do a full strategy right now, what is one question they could ask themselves or ask their organization to answer that would just make things, move a little bit more towards that? Because sometimes strategy can be like a bigger budget item, right? So what would be like a small step?
Okay, so the biggest question I would say is, what are we absolutely best at, and how can we focus our work on that?
Okay.
So instead of trying to do all the new stuff, trying to do things you're not equipped for, we're not short for ideas in our sector. We're great at that. Operationalizing them is where it gets tricky. And so knowing what you're best at and how to keep building on that is a great step forward. And my second question would be, what do we want to build next, or what do we think is needed to help us, grow there? And thinking about one key investment area or department or, capability that we think we need. So if you are, new to corporate development, but you're saying like, we really think that's where the opportunity is for our org, what are those steps you can take this year to start getting ready for an investment like that? Do you need to do some research? Do you need to talk to some advisors? Can you get yourself in a position or create the environment, right? Like we talked about at the beginning, create an environment where your strategy or mission or your movement could succeed.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. We have run out of time. Thank you so very much for your wisdom here. If people want to connect with you, what is it that they should do?
So definitely here on LinkedIn, as Heather mentioned, there's a lot of great content from the course of a long time posting, but I love connecting with folks, and feel free to send me a DM as well. Otherwise, you can go to lafemina.co. So that's my last name.co. And you can find more strategy resources and information about how to get started with some of these key questions and conversations at your organization.
Yes, that is great advice. So I encourage everyone to do that. And if you don't yet have a strategy in your organization, that's okay. We've got some steps here today that can get you started to think about it and put it on your radar. And if you already have a strategy, but it's sitting on the shelf because it's too big, think about what you could do to make it more actionable, help you make decisions, and really make it more of a tool within your organization as opposed to a document that you created. So thank you so much. I know this is going to be very helpful. And if you're watching this on replay, please do follow up and ask questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, everybody.